What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. I am Peter Parkour of the Theorists, and we are here at Sci-Fi on the Rock 2024, and I've got a very special guest here with me today. I've got Brian, I can't, yeah, you.
I'm Brian Herring, yeah.
Brian Herring, that's right, of course. We've got two Brians here today, that's cool. So Brian is here all the way from, I'm going to assume the UK. You're here visit. Yep, perfect. Yep. And Brian is, I would say, been pretty big in the world of puppeteering for a few years, I'd say now.
About 30.
30 years, that's insane. Because, I mean, for a full career that you've got that's as varied as it is, I mean, that's 30 years is impressive. And you're not stopping, are you?
Not unless somebody stops me. They keep trying. I just won't go away. Yeah, I've been at it since the 90s, and so it does catch up with you. Suddenly you go, oh, it's a long time.
Yeah, that's fair. But you know what? When you're having fun, it doesn't really seem like that.
There is that.
Now, before I get into the nitty-gritty of the interview, I always have to do what we do for our socials. If you're a fan of the channel, or if you're just stopping by for the first time, make sure to hit that share, subscribe, like, hit all the buttons, do all the things on YouTube and Facebook and all the socials, because we'd like to bring more content to you like this, especially with some of our special guests. All right, so Brian, we've already touched a little bit on your career, but if you want, please tell us about yourself.
Well, I started as an actor. I was doing some stand-up, and I worked in theatre generally. I did crew work, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And I was kind of chipping away as an actor, and I met a guy. My father ran a pub, and for years, and a gentleman drank in his pub, and his son worked on a TV show called Spitting Image, which was a UK-based political show in the 80s. And this was the early 90s by this point. And so I wound up at an audition for that show.
Okay.
And I didn't know it was an audition. I thought it was just a training workshop. They said, have you done it before? I lied. I said I'd worked on the tour of Little Shop of Horrors, which was true because it came through our local theatre and I moved the scenery.
Okay.
And they said, well, it's very different to that. You have to work on a monitor and watch the monitor and listen to the recording of the voice and lip sync the puppet to the recording of the voice. And so I tried out for this thing, and 6 weeks later I was a trainee on the TV show, and they've never caught me since, so I've just kept doing it.
We're just like, we're just going to keep that from the all the credentials are on the green for right now. And from there, you kind of, where did you go from there?
So from there, I was luckily at that job, I was being trained on the job by some of the best puppeteers in the country.
Oh, wow.
In the UK at the time, and I was assisting them on other shows. And then I started getting my own work. I went to work for the Jim Henson Company in the UK for about 10 years. I did everything they did on TV for 10 years with them, and they shut their UK arm down. And then I just started working in movies and TV and just wherever sort of.
I like how that was just so common. Yeah, and you know, I naturally just went to movies.
Well, it was lucky. Well, what was happening, and I think if you talk to any of the guys who kind of did Return of the Jedi, a lot of the guys who worked on Return of the Jedi had just been in the studio next door working on the Dark Crystal. And so it was like, who wants to come and work on this? So people were just moving from job to job. And because I was fortunate enough to be working with a whole bunch of very established puppeteers in the UK, they were all on all the jobs. So they'd go, oh, do you want to come and work with us on this? So you kind of, it was just, oh, suddenly I'm doing a movie.
Oh, very cool.
And it was, there were a lot less of us at the time back then. And so you just all knew each other. And the kind of teams, teams developed, and the same people kind of worked together all the time. So you then sort of found yourselves working with various people, and you would go to auditions, and you'd know everybody there,
right?
And you'd pretty much know who was right for what. So that was
so you knew your strengths. You knew
pretty much.
It might be for me, but Philip over here would probably be better
exactly. And so from there, I think the first film I did was the first film I did was Muppets Treasure Island, and everybody was on that. And then the next one after that was probably The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Big fan.
Yeah, and then
I think I saw that you were one of the Vortigons.
One of the Vogons, yeah. I was one of the little Vogons, and I'm also most of the hands. Whenever you see any of the buttons being pushed, with the Vogons, because my hand would fit in the glove. I think they molded it on someone quite thin, and I had very thin wrists at the time, so I did a lot of the close-up shots. Cool. And then that kind of just followed on. So I met you when you meet people who are working for Henson's, a lot of them went off and started their own shops. So I wound up working for some people who'd worked at Henson's, but we got on, and so that's how Hellboy 2 came about. I knew the guys that were building one particular creature, so they took me to Budapest, and we did that. And then it just kind of rolled on from there.
Because you were the fish vendor in
Hellboy 2. The fish vendor in Hellboy 2,
cool,
which Guillermo thought was hilarious because my name was Herring, so he really liked that.
And then you moved on to my wheelhouse. You moved on to Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, the Star Wars thing, I was very, very exciting because I was a kid. I was 7 in '77, so
Right.
I was a massive Star Wars fan, and I had previously worked for a guy called Neil Scanlon, and Neil won his Oscar for a film called Babe, and
Right, okay.
I worked with him on Prometheus, and we got on, and we kind of had a good working relationship. And I wound up speaking to him on the telephone one day, and I was sort of bemoaning the state of the industry at the time. It was quite quiet, and I knew Star Wars was coming back. And I'd said that, I'd got to find out who's got the job now and kick his door in. And Neil said, don't do that. I like the door where it is. And then he subsequently made me the puppetry consultant for The Force Awakens.
Right.
And so I was on that show with him for 16 months. And
Wow.
during that time, I was helping to cast the performers and work with the art department on how you could hide people in sets and how we could put like 4 or 5 guys into one giant suit. And then during that time, we started getting designs for this come through. Can you see it there? This little fella you may have heard of. So I was tasked with doing some little character studies with a gentleman called Josh Lee, and Josh built me a little puppet to where we had to play with that, and just to show JJ how you could make a ball with half a ball on top if you could make it act.
Right.
And then from there, the whole team was formed with Matt Denton and Dave Chapman, and you know, we just kind of developed this character, and we wound up doing it in the movie, and now I'm sitting here talking to you in Newfoundland.
Yes, this is what happens. You start the Star Wars, and then you end up on YouTube. That's generally how things work. So, like I mentioned, obviously my wheelhouse is Star Wars, and like you pretty much, I don't know if they planned it at the time, but usually the droids end up they steal the show with a lot of Star Wars stuff. Like we've had 3PO, we've had R2-D2, we've even had, I cannot remember his name from
K2SO.
Rogue One, K2SO,
Yep.
You know exactly where I was getting from. And like, so you were BB-8. Did you have at any time, was there thinking like, this little guy is going to be huge from the emoting?
No, we didn't have the faintest idea. I mean, when Dave and I got the job, we did a test for JJ, which kind of did a demonstration for JJ with Dave, myself, and Matt performing the various versions of it. And up until that point, it could have gone digital at any point, and JJ really wanted there to be a practical element on set. And we did a show and tell for him and Kathleen Kennedy and some producers, and it was possibly the most stressful day I've ever had on the job. But then JJ ran us some questions about how it worked and what we did, and he said, I love the way you're puppeteering it, go read the script you're in the movie. And that's the day we got cast. And then Dave and I sat down and read this red-paged
Do not show.
Well, yeah, we had
to
to give our phones in. And there was someone sitting in the room with us. We could take notes, but we couldn't copy anything, or And we realised suddenly that this thing wasn't just in the movie slightly; it was all the way through.
Yeah, very
and
important character.
Everybody was going to see this, and like we suddenly realised what we'd been given, and it was massive.
Oh crap! Oh crap!
Yeah,
oh, crap,
it was brown trousers time. So we didn't really know. I mean, I've said this before, but the crew at Pinewood, if they don't like what you're doing, like
they're gonna.
But they were really receptive to it.
Okay.
Because I mean, those guys have worked on Bourne and Batman and Bond. Anything that begins with a B, they've done.
True.
It.
Yeah.
So
BB-8,
BB-8, yeah. So they're like, oh, we like your little robot. That's always funny when that's on. And so we didn't really know how it was going to be received by the general public. And then the teaser trailer dropped. And it was like the third shot in the trailer.
Yeah, there's a.
And suddenly the internet went crazy. And they're like, oh, Disney have made another toy commercial, and this thing is CGI. And they said it was all going to be practical, and that's clearly not practical. And that shot is 100% practical,
Right.
with a visual effects fix on the back of it, because that
That's where
particular
you are,
shot
right?
is where I'm standing pushing this thing behind the camera car with Dave lashed to the back, attempting to take an eye line as we're chasing a camera car through the desert in some blazing heat. And for about 2 days, we thought we were going to get the Jar Jar Binks treatment. And we're like,
really?
oh, no, they hate it. And then Mark Hamill came out and said, you know that thing's real, right? And I've been playing with it. And suddenly the internet changed its mind and went, oh, well, maybe we like it now then.
Well, if Luke says it's fine,
And then as it went on, people suddenly realised it was a practical effect, and they rolled the red carpet version out at Anaheim, and everybody lost their minds. And then they saw the film, and BB-8 was very well received.
Of course.
So we were really touched with how well received it was, and I didn't realise quite how big it was. Dave and I were doing. Oh no, Dave and I were in. We were in Cape Town when the first trailer dropped and they brought that thing out, which was amazing. But I was doing a film with Tim Rhodes, who was Admiral Akbar.
Oh.
And another puppeteer, Tom Wilton, as well, who has been in a lot. He was Aftab, Akbar's son, in episode 9.
Okay,
and we were out in India doing a movie. And The Force Awakens had come out, and we were walking along what I will, for the sake of this conversation, call Mumbai High Street.
All right, okay.
And there was BB-8 in the window of a shop, and you're like, this thing is everywhere. Absolutely everywhere.
The movie's not even out yet.
Yeah, I think it had just come out. And so the toys were appearing, but they were in India, you know, and I just like, wow, that's like such an exotic and wild place, you know.
Full international kaboom.
Yeah, completely. Right. So it was a big old responsibility, but I'm quite pleased with how it was received.
So where you're a puppeteer, obviously, and you're working with these creatures, and of course I'm going to use the example of Star Wars, because you did end up sharing a lot of screen time with Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, and a lot of these other characters. So are they taking their cues from you? Are you taking their cues from them? Or is it just...
It's the same. It's as if you were playing a scene.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I do the dialogue for BB-8 on set.
Okay.
So they'll ask it questions and I'll beep at them just to give them something to react to. Because Anthony Daniels, the mighty Anthony Daniels, C-3PO, he really appreciated working with BB-8 because R2 never spoke to him.
No.
Because Kenny couldn't hear. Kenny was inside, he couldn't hear him. Couldn't really see out.
No, he just...
And so Anthony would have to deliver his dialogue, wait for the response in his head, and then deliver more dialogue.
Okay.
But I would beep at him, so he just used to find that absolutely hilarious. But he used to keep looking at me. So he had to train himself to look at BB-8, and while I was going, and he wouldn't look at the idiot in the green suit behind.
So where you were doing the beeps, did you actually end up working with Bill Hader at any point?
No, I think Bill was brought in afterwards. I was saying Bill, I've never met him. But there was Bill Hader, I think it was Bill Hader and Ben Schwartz, and they were brought in as consultants. And I think they tried a lot of different versions, but I think what ended up actually happening was that we kind of all, between us, we'd all given it an intention and a feel, and then Matthew Wood at Skywalker Sound, they created an entire language for it.
Wow.
And I think both Bill and Ben Schwartz have said that they don't think there's anything that they did involved in the movie, but they were brought on as consultants, and everybody had an input into it, though. And
some of the sounds, obviously, okay, I'm talking about them now, but like some of the sounds that helped to create, so like they're the voice, you're the motion, and it's so cohesive for a little teeny character.
Yeah, I mean, I can reiterate that say Matt Wood and his team created all that, did all those sounds, and so they were kind of like, but I mean, I'd say everybody had an input into it. But I think that the Skywalker, I did a meeting with Neil Scanlon, asked me to go to a meeting quite early on, and in came Matthew Wood, who I didn't know at the time, and Ben Burt, the mighty Burt.
Oh, the lightsaber.
Yeah. He always walks around banging things. Just to see what it sounds like. You know, he doesn't do that. But I suddenly found myself in a meeting with. I was aware of Matthew, and I never met Ben, but I'd seen that documentary of him banging wires to make lasers, and then Ben Burt said to me, "What do you think it sounds like?" So it was like, I think it sounds like R2-D2 but higher. And so I made some noises and I whistled a bit, and I was asked not to whistle on set because it feeds back on the mics. And
fair.
So what I had to do was not bleed over anybody's production dialogue. So I had to kind of cut everything off.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But then when we did some very, very short reshoots for the Rise of Skywalker. We did some pickups. We did about a week, 2 weeks, if that. And we did some scenes where JJ asked me to deliver the dialogue in English.
Oh.
So I was playing scenes with Daisy backwards and forwards, and it worked really, really well.
Wow.
We kind of thought, why didn't we do that early on? But it was pretty good, because I remember that Peter Mayhew used to do the dialogue in English as Chewie.
Because you just see his mouth moving, and then they added the
that old man's mad. You know, if you see some of that undubbed footage, you can hear Peter talking.
That's priceless. So obviously, of course, yes, we've been talking about Star Wars because that's my jam and everything. But you've been talking. There's so many other franchises. You've been part of the Alien franchise, where you were a part of Prometheus. I think it was the first little creature that shows up. Sorry, behind the scenes stuff. So the little worm that comes out in that first.
Yep.
So were you working the flaps? Were you working standing
There
up?
were two different versions of that. There were versions of it, and we were under the set with all this black goo leaking through the set, and there were two of us per the hammerpedes, these things were called, and they were run on. We had big, control rods, and they were all done with cables, and they ran up these umbilicals into these things, and then you could as you pulled them, they would do various things by doing things. And so someone had the body, someone had the head, and there was a sweet point where you could actually get them to sit up, and there were two versions. There was the version with the head folded, and there was the version with the flaps open.
Okay.
And they CG'd between the two. They didn't. So they opened up a bit, but they didn't do that whole thing. So there's a CG takeover where it opens up, and there was that. So there was that version, and then there was a rodded puppet where Dave and I are actually up on the Dave Chapman again. So we were up, laying in the goo with rods, just a very simple rod puppet, and we were in black, and they took us out, and that was a very successful way of doing that. And then there was an animatronic rig on a false arm that would tighten, and then we could snap. Sean Harris, not Sean Harris. It was
I know. Yeah,
Tim Spall's Rafe Spall's arm.
Yeah,
and we bought this rig in on set. And we kind of put it together, and the crew were just looking at it like, "What's this?" And so wait, and then we pushed the thing forward, and there was a break point, and it made a noise. There was a slap bar on the thing, so when you pushed it forward, it made an audible crack, and there were these big guys just going, "Whoa!" You know, and you just to see where it's broken. So that was it, and then there was an alien at the end, the Deacon alien that came out. That was a rod puppet as well.
And because I've always liked the puppets that they've used with the practical xenomorphs, because especially in, I think it was Alien 3, where you really got to see the wires that would pull back the mouth.
Right, yeah.
But like in the Alien franchise, it's come a long way since Ridley Scott putting his hand in to flutter in the air.
Yeah. Although every now and then that kind of stuff works. We had a situation on we had a moment on the Last Jedi, where the Porgs are in the ship, trashing the ship, and they're all over the place. I don't think this made the movie, but we had one with its back end sticking out through the wall and little feet going, and there was the
little bum is out,
and we had a puppeteer called Neil, and he was up. There's a strip light that runs around the edges of the Falcon cockpit, and we cut a hole. We cut a hole in the side of the Falcon. Yeah, I know, it was just sacrilege. And we couldn't get a puppet in there, so we had Neil Sterenberg, his name is, and he had a balled up sweatshirt just to make a shadow, and he's moving it in just up in the light, and you can't really see what it is, but you know there's something up there, and we're just trying to give the impression that it was, we had that the Porgs had got into the ship and they were really messing with it, and so it was just something to make a shadow, but the sweatshirt worked. So it's oftentimes putting a little bit of fishing line on something and pulling it, it works.
It works for the imagination, because you know the tricks, but for us, the viewers,
you just see something moving, and your brain fills in the rest.
It's part of that. So now we were talking about this earlier too. Do you ever find that there's a bit of a disconnect? It's almost weird because or like the worm that's in Prometheus and BB-8, or the fish merchant in Hellboy 2. I mean, you're looking at those like, that's me, but it's not. It is, but it isn't. You're like, that's me. No, it isn't.
Well, I mean, the good thing about being a puppeteer is nobody knows who you are.
Right.
But the bad thing about being a puppeteer is nobody knows who you are.
Right.
So there is a certain thing where with BB-8, BB-8 was a big team effort. So you go, yeah, I did that, but there's a lot of us did that.
Right.
But, it's, there 20 people brought that to the screen.
True.
I happen to be very lucky in the fact that I can come along and do these, and I try and trumpet everybody else while I'm here. But you do look at that and go, well, it is me, but it's not me, and it's kind of mine, but it's not mine. And there was a weird thing that we had. BB-8 was ours for a year.
Yeah. Your little ball of joy.
Nobody knew about it.
Right. It's true.
And then the movie came out, and it was just like the public owned it from that point onwards. It's just everywhere.
BB-8's still present in a lot of the cartoons that have been coming out too. And it's BB-8 definitely has their legacy.
It turns up in Battlefront.
This is true.
There he is.
So I'm going to ask a little side question: is BB-8 a boy or a girl? There's always been a debate.
Well, it was always a boy. It was always a he in the first script. And then he was a he in The Last Jedi. So it's like there was a whole thing where it was an ambiguity. It was going to be then it was going to be female, but it is referred to as a he right the way through the first movie.
You heard it here.
Well, I mean, it's not the first time we've said that.
No, this is true.
But it's true. So it was always a he in the same way that R2 or C3PO is. But I don't think they date much.
Yeah, well, this is true. Like it doesn't really matter, but I remember when they were first coming out. Well, the BB is clearly a girl. I was like, I never considered like a gender for a droid, and I was like, that's kind of a different take, and it's kind of neat. But I figured I would just kind of throw that in there. So, regarding practical effects, we're seeing a pretty big resurgence in that because there was the. I don't dislike visual effects, really and truly, because they do hold a place in a lot of movies because as technology grows and obviously pictures are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But like you look at Mad Max Fury Road, there were so many practical effects in that from the vehicles and the explosions and what they were doing with Tom Hardy and all that.
Yeah, but there was also an awful lot of visual effects done on that movie.
Which is true.
Yeah.
Right? But when you can't see it and you can't tell, that's when it works.
Well, that's right. I mean, there is this kind of weird visual effects versus practical effects thing, but you can work them hand in glove now. And when there's a marriage, BB-8 is every tool in the box. He's a practical effect. He's a puppet. So there's manual versions, there's remote control versions, there's digital versions, and also whenever BB-8 comes out as a rod puppet, visual effects step in and they get rid of the guy in the green suit behind him. So when you're working together like that and you don't know what you're looking at, that's when it's working.
That's the ideal situation.
And if you look at Jurassic Park, the original one, there's more practical effects in Jurassic Park than there were digital effects. But everybody went for the digital and went, "Oh, this is amazing," and they were amazing. They still hold up. But now they're marrying and you can't tell. That's when they work.
I remember there was a behind-the-scenes look. I think it was for Attack of the Clones when they added in the extra scene of Anakin and Padme running through the droid factory.
Right.
And it was so jarring because, like, on screen you see all the things, the bugs flying, all the arms moving, but then you just see the blue boxes
room,
that are oh, and it's kind of a disconnect when you see that. It works with the technology of the time. You look back and I'm like, oh yeah, you can definitely see. But now it's getting. Things are getting more crisp and all that stuff. And now you're looking at some of the movies that were heavily CGI a little while ago, and now we're moving by, like Alien Romulus is coming out in August. And
which one's already?
Alien Romulus.
Yeah.
They've said, I cannot remember the director's name, but he's a huge fan. He did the resurgence of Evil Dead. He did the remake of that, which was gore galore, and it was so nice. I didn't catch the movie that he did after that, but he has gone on record saying like, there's a lot of practical effects in that. So
he has, but he's also gone on record saying that he cuts his own visual effects scenes, and so he went as practical as he could.
Good.
And then with any of these things, you go as practical as you can until you can't.
Right.
It's like with the Porg puppets in the Last Jedi. There were practical puppets in there right up to the point they had to fly.
They had to fly.
And some of them are practical, some of them are CGI, and the trick is to be able to do them and not know the difference.
And like we've mentioned, that's perfect when it gets that situation. Yeah. And honestly, if it gets to the point where it is completely visual effects, obviously you're out of a job at that point. Potentially, I don't know.
Well, yes and no, but I mean, there's puppeteers working through visual effects now. I mean, a friend of mine, Tom, who I mentioned earlier, he does a lot of reference puppetry. So there's stuff on set.
True.
And then they will either CG over the top of it or they'll remove it, but it gives the actors something to look at and something to react to. I worked on the Robert Downey Doolittle movie, and so I had the Polly, the parrot. So I would have a little green parrot, and that would sit on the back of my hand. So I'd be doing this, and it'd have a little head here, and so Robert would speak to it, and I would speak as the parrot to Robert, and we'd shoot a couple like that, and he would know wherever it was, so it would be moving around on his arm, and then we'd do one take like that, and then I'd go away, and I'd do the dialogue from over there, and he would remember where it was, and he would keep his eye line.
Oh, right, because then they could add it. Okay, cool.
So it helps the actor get a performance and an intention of and an idea of where the different animals are.
Okay, all right. And it's like you say, the marriage of that works really well, and it requires a little more time with the different takes and whatnot. But if it works, it works. Yeah. And you're teaching me about this stuff. There's stuff that I'm unaware of. So clearly, I'm surprised by a lot of that stuff. So it really works. So regarding puppeteering, that's one thing that obviously you're well known for. But have you done much in the field in terms of motion capture, like of reference? Like, have you worn the beads to kind of
I did a lot of that. I did a lot of that 1,000 years ago. I suppose it was around about 2009, I think 2008, 2009. I did a TV series which actually was a Canadian UK co-production called What's Your News, and it was for little kids, and it was about ants. They're running a news channel. And they would interview children as to what was big in there. It was all scripted stuff.
Right.
And I played an anteater who thought he was an ant. So he was big and he was sort of lumbery and he was kind of bouncing about. So we would have the suits on and the dots and everything, but we would also have goggles so we could see our avatars as we did it.
Okay.
So it was like puppetry because we always watch ourselves on monitors. So I was watching the whole thing play out.
You were puppeting yourself.
Yeah, I was puppeteering myself. And so the characters I was working with were much smaller than me, even though the actors were sometimes taller. So I would take an eye line within the monitor down, and he would have to look. So he'd be looking up here, and I'd be looking kind of at his hip.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
and we had a virtual table between us as we presented this thing, and he would have to walk round me physically, and he used to follow a big tape line on the floor. If he wanted to walk around the table between me and the table, but he would actually have to walk around the outside of me.
Oh, right.
And I could get around the table in about 5 steps, and it would take him about 30, just because of the size of his character and the way that it was scaled.
Right, because he had to make it.
Yeah, so I've done some of that. I think that's probably. I've done a few other little bits and pieces, but that was quite a big TV series.
Wow, and then because that shows like the range, I guess, because you're just not you're a man of many hats, you know. And so regarding that, like, I mean, we talked about like because obviously the puppeteering career and your the motion capture and all this stuff, and the people that you worked with. But is there anything in the world of geek that you're looking forward to? Coming, like, let's look to the future.
What's coming out? I just watched all of Fallout, which I thought was fantastic.
Oh, that was so good.
What else? I'm just trying to think what else is coming. I've been looking at a couple of the trailers. I'm quite looking forward to the other game movie that's coming out with Kate Blanchett in it. Borderlands.
Yes.
Borderlands looks fun. Beetlejuice looks fun.
Oh man,
I can't wait to see that.
Big fans.
Yeah,
you mentioned earlier the Star Wars Outlaws game.
The Outlaws game. I shall vanish for a couple of weeks.
That would be like the game has come out. You shall not see me surface.
I did that with Spider-Man 2. I just disappeared and just
the platinum for that was 30 hours. Like, don't talk to me. I have to do this. I'm swinging. Leave me alone.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you're looking to all of that, and I'm sure there's stuff that you can't talk about because you're clearly working, man. So I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to press you to that at all because I know you're not going to tell me anything. But ultimately, that's pretty much it for my questions. So do you have anything else that you wanted to mention?
No.
No, perfect. We've covered it all. There's nothing else. Everyone go home.
Come to Sci-Fi on the Rock.
Absolutely, yes. Come see Brian. Get him to sign stuff. Talk to him. Take pictures. Do all that fun stuff. So beyond that, that's really all I have to say. But because we are who we are, and when we're slaves to everything else, I was hoping that we could make you an honorary distorted theorist.
Oh, there you go. Look at me.
Channel.
I'm highly distorted. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Well, I mean, you can't be more distorted than us.
Very kind. Thank you very much. I shall remember this moment for as long as I can.
How long you got? So anyways, from here, this is basically Peter Parkour, the Distorted Theorist, signing off from Sci-Fi on the Rock, here with Brian Herring, one of our newest friends to the channel, and hopefully for many, many moments or years to come, as long as he can remember us. So yeah, from all of us here at Sci-Fi on the Rock, I want to thank you for showing up and doing this, and for everything else that you're doing here with all of our guests, and hopefully you've got tons of fans, and I'm sure I've kept you away from your booth for too long. But yeah, I'm just going to end it there. This is Peter Parkour of the Distorted Theorists, and like we always say around here, keep it real.